Hi, welcome to Behind Every Employer, a podcast that explores the intersection of workforce development and education and searches for solutions to a more talented, skilled, and productive workforce of the future. Join us as we chat with employers, educators, and students who want to join that mission. This podcast is being sponsored by the Coalition on Adult Basic Education. Now to our hosts, Anson Green and Jeffrey Abramowitz. Hey, Anson, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. How's it going, Jeff?
It's going well. We have a really special show tonight. We put this together last minute because it was so important. And I'm going to turn it over to you in a second, but I want our audience to know that I so appreciate our guests and you really spending some time to get this special episode together, all about immigration and some of the things happening around the world. So, Anson, why don't you set us up for what's going to happen tonight?
Yeah, happy to do that. I mean, I just felt like the other day, like this is a great platform for us to get some experts out to talk to our business community and to our education community about the things that are happening in Ukraine and things that have been happening around the world. You know, over the years, we see these things, they come up, and here right now, the whole world is watching the situation in Europe. We're just a few weeks into these situations and now kind of inundated with the 24-hour news cycle. But I mean, for me, I'm sure you, probably most of our listeners, if not all of them, we all wonder, like, as individuals, as business leaders, as educators, how can we get involved? You know, how can we, how will this impact our communities? How will we need to adjust? And what can we do to really dig in and get involved? And you know, I'm thinking more recently about Afghanistan and the influx of refugees we saw over the last year, and how that has been rolling out across the country in different ways. And you know, I just always dig down and I think, like, man, what can I be doing here at business? When I was in ESL and teaching, I was always wondering, like, will these students come into my classroom? How will I know what should I be prepared for? So we really wanted to kind of focus today, bring in some really national class, world class experts to talk about from their expert positions how they see things transpiring in terms of what we can expect in the business community in the next year as things roll out with Ukraine, what's been happening with the Afghan refugees, what happens in general for refugees that come into the United States, and really kind of unpack some of those things that a lot of us, myself included, really don't know the great details on. So they've been very gracious with their time, and I'm just really happy that they've been able to pause their work at a very busy time for themselves and kind of bring us their expertise, bring our listeners some expertise, and come join us in this conversation.
Absolutely. It's going to be a great conversation. Looking forward to it. We've been working on this episode on immigration, and it's just so important a topic right now across the country. So we want to give a shout out before we even begin and bring everybody up to speed on where we are on some things. So that's all right with you?
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, it's something that evolves by the hour. You know, we're all watching our TVs and wake up in the morning, and things have changed overnight. And I think keeping this as up to date as possible is just really necessary in our time right now.
Awesome. You want to introduce our guest? We'll bring her on.
Yeah, let's have Samantha come in. She's just a wonderful ally over there at National Immigration Forum. And we really were scouting around for some great experts out there that were paying a lot more attention to this on the inside in terms of U.S. policy, what to expect in the workforce systems and the education systems. And so we just love getting this great subject matter expertise and updates for our listeners. So welcome, Samantha.
Hi, thank you both so much for having me.
So give it to us, like, where are we today? And, you know, we're at the end of April. We're kind of sitting back. We've been watching what's going on in the world. And I know it's like ever changing. Like, I pick up the paper every single day and there's something else happening. And we want to really just inform our audience and keep them posted on what's happening nationally. So give it to us. Where are we today?
Sure. So I'm sure you all have seen what's going on in Ukraine with the Ukrainian refugee crisis. So that has been an ongoing conflict as of yesterday. So we're at the end of April. There was over 5.2 million refugees, Ukrainian refugees, who had fled the conflict. about 2.9 million had fled to Poland, although there are many Ukrainians in other countries. And of course, there's conversation about the US's efforts to help Ukrainian refugees seek safety in the United States. Also something very exciting happened very recently on the 21st of April. The Biden administration announced the rollout of a program called Uniting for Ukraine, which is sort of a concrete plan in response to the Biden administration's pledge to welcome 100,000 Ukrainian refugees as part of the US's response to this conflict. And yesterday, so a lot happened yesterday, the program was rolled out online on USCIS and DHS's website. So I'm happy to talk a little bit more about the program, which is U.S. efforts to help Ukrainians get to the U.S., if that's helpful.
Yeah, I think it'd be super helpful. We're going to get into the podcast and really be digging into these issues with some other guests as well. And you were on when we talked about this, and I think maybe set the stage of, where are we today and what's the program about?
Sure. So the U.S. refugee resettlement system is very robust, although it is rebuilding after several cuts were made under the prior administration. And it's notoriously slow. It's a long process. It's a slow process. We saw recently with the Afghanistan evacuation, the widespread use of humanitarian parole, which is a tool that exists in the immigration system to bring Afghans into the U.S. So in thinking about how to respond to the Ukrainian situation, there are only so many options, whether it be refugee resettlement, family petitions, things like that. But the most expeditious is humanitarian parole. It can be the quickest form. So the Uniting for Ukraine program, which was just announced, is a way, and it's very innovative, that the U.S. government is utilizing private sponsorships. So what can happen is a U.S.-based person or non-governmental organization like an NGO or a nonprofit can apply to be the sponsor or the supporter, is the language that they're using, of a named Ukrainian. So they have to know who they're petitioning for, and to sign on that they're going to financially support that person or persons during the length of their stay in the United States. Both the supporter and I'm going to call the Ukrainian person or persons the beneficiary, like the person who will benefit from this parole. Both will undergo vetting and background checks. And then if that's approved, our understanding as of now, although this information is still, forthcoming in more details, but we'll get approval to travel to the U.S. And then at the border, at the port of entry, most likely an airport, CBP will make a determination on a case-by-case basis to admit them in humanitarian parole status for no more than 2 years. If someone's admitted with humanitarian parole, they are then eligible to apply for a work permit. So as of right now, the work permit is not incidental to status. They're separate processes. And then the supporter will be in charge of helping, that person integrate into the U.S., whether it's to find employment or English classes if needed, things like that. So it's separate from traditional refugee resettlement.
Got it.
That sounds super cool. Like, how much would it cost to be a sponsor? Like, could I do it?
So my understanding as of right now is that there is not a fee to be a sponsor, but again, that could change, but that you would have to demonstrate financial resources in order to support however many people you're applying for. Private individuals can, as can organizations, but just, recognizing what actually goes into that and sort of the duration of that responsibility.
Yeah, I was going to ask, thinking in terms of like the workforce and ESL side of things, the adult ed side of things, like, when I'm looking at, what I see on the news and stuff, my immediate thought is like, this is a long-term gambit for these individuals, like their towns are destroyed. But is there better intelligence on like what we believe these refugees will want to do in terms of returning home to rebuild? It's a different climate, perhaps, depending on the outcomes of certain areas of the country and stuff like that. But it's different than they're never going back, which you see in some refugee situations. So what is the kind of the intelligence on the ground that you're picking up, knowing that that's better than what Anson sees watching TV and making assumptions? Like what's your sense of that?
Sure. So I think that's a really good point, or a really good question. Humanitarian parole is designed to be temporary.
Right.
So a 2-year increment. Similarly, TPS, temporary protected status, was designated for Ukrainians who are already in the United States. Also a temporary form of immigration protection. So the intention right now is that these are temporary protections. And unlike refugee resettlement, which is, this idea of permanency where you can come as a refugee, obviously different cases have different situations, but generally once you have 1 year of residence in the United States as a refugee, you can apply for your green card. And then once you get your green card, 5 years later, you can apply for citizenship. Humanitarian parole does not confer any of those benefits. So there's no pathway from humanitarian parole directly to a green card or even citizenship. So there are likely going to be people who have family members that can apply for them through the traditional family the family petition process. And there might be some or many who apply for asylum. But as of right now, the intention is that it's temporary and that people, Ukrainians many will be interested in returning home once. Again, it's hard. We don't have a crystal ball to know how long this conflict will last and what post-conflict reconstruction looks like.
Right. Excellent.
Wow. So is this a victory? I mean, is this what we best case scenario, what we would want to see, or should we be advocating for something more?
So I think it's a really great step. I certainly think it's an innovative way to respond to a humanitarian emergency, that our immigration system is not as agile as many advocates would hope for. It's not a permanent solution, and it's a solution only aimed at this conflict. Of course, there are many conflicts around the world that this protection has not been extended to, but I certainly think it's a really solid step and can offer protection for many people.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Yeah, great stuff. Thank you so much. You're really helping us frame what we're going to be talking about for the next 45 minutes, which is really about the immigration issues that we're dealing with in our country. And I think in order to understand it better, we really need to know where we are today. Mm-hmm. And we'll be talking to you more during the podcast about immigration, not only from Ukraine, but across all our borders and as people come in. So thank you so much for taking some time just to bring us up to speed. So we're in context. We're in good space now. Anson, I think we're ready, man. I think we're ready to dive deep and really start talking about this issue.
I've got my notepad ready. This is going to be good stuff. And I'm so thankful for the update here because, like I said, it's just evolving so fast. And, our systems want to be ready to respond. And so getting this information from you has just been really nice to have that just-in-time feedback. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're listening to Behind Every Employer. We're going to be right back. Hi, welcome to Behind Every Employer, a podcast that explores the intersection, workforce development and education, and searches for solutions to a more talented, skilled, and productive workforce of the future. Join us as we chat with employers, educators, and students who want to join that mission. This podcast is being sponsored by the Coalition on Adult Basic Education. Now to our hosts, Anson Green and Jeffrey Abramowitz. You want to introduce who our guests are going to be, and we'll pull them on?
Yeah, absolutely. So just real quick here, we've brought together, I'm going to let them kind of talk a little bit more about their expertise and what they do, but we've brought individuals from two major organizations, the National Immigration Forum and Upwardly Global. And these are really well-known organizations in our community. So we have Helena Korek, who is the Senior Manager for Integration Programs at the National Immigration Forum. and she really focuses on kind of the new American workforce citizenship program, and supports the corporate roundtable, which is something I want her to talk more about. I sit on the corporate roundtable, and I find that is a really enlightening group of businesses that the National Immigration Forum has coalesced together to kind of talk about immigration issues. She's going to be joined by Samantha Howland Zalana, and she's the Vice President of Policy and Advocacy at the National Immigration Forum. And she really works with these kind of advanced immigration reform issues related to unaccompanied immigrant children, immigrant courts, enforcement, and the undocumented community. So together from the National Immigration Forum, they're going to bring us some really sharp kind of policy focus about like how does this impact our workforce and how will this impact our communities. They both have some great deep background too. I was very impressed by their backgrounds in immigration law. So they're going to be joined by someone that I've always enjoyed working with, Jenny Murray, who it's kind of a family gathering here, an old home week, because Jenny used to work at the National Immigration Forum, and now she's the vice president for programs at Upwardly Global. And this organization is just a really enlightened organization when it comes to targeting and working on kind of a nationally recognized job coaching and skill building model that really seeks to help immigrant and refugee job seekers and connections to corporate partners around the country. So she's going to bring, again, another sharpened focus on what businesses can do and what they can be expecting, and what they do as an organization to help support that community of new immigrants. Jenny comes in with just years of experience in the private sector and public sector as well. And I think I just want to thank them for their time coming at such a busy time for them and join us on the episode. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello. Good to be here.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and get started here, and we'll start with some introductions. You guys can talk a little bit more about your organizations, but can you please give our listeners who probably may not be familiar with the National Immigration Forum or Upwardly Global a little bit about what you do. So first we'll start with Samantha and Helena and talk about the forum and what is the focus of the forum and what are your roles at the forum?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having us. We're really excited to be here. So the Forum is a nonpartisan national advocacy organization that works with different constituencies and coalitions to build trusted relationships to advocate for immigration reform, where immigration is seen as a really strong and important part of our country in the United States. And we engage through constituencies. Primarily, we call them the Bibles, businesses, and badges, where we work with different law enforcement, different religious organizations, and businesses to achieve immigration reform through advocacy and different direct work that Helena can speak a little bit more about.
Excellent. So, let me ask a drill down on one thing I mentioned in the intro, but the National Immigration Forum Corporate Roundtable. I sit on this, but tell our audience, our listeners, more about the roundtable and how does that inform your work?
Yes, thank you, Anson, and thank you for your involvement on the Corporate Roundtable. So our Corporate Roundtable for the New American Workforce convenes the nation's foremost corporations to really develop and implement best practices for immigrant inclusion at the work site and advance that legislative advocacy initiatives to support these new Americans. A lot that Sam does on her team on policy and advocacy. And our objectives on the table really include collaborating among membership to strengthen the workplace for the foreign-born. We are working on advocating for pro-immigrant policies and programs, and then conducting research to really support employers and their immigrant workforce. And we do this through different activities, quarterly meetings, best practice sharing at these meetings, coordinated congressional meetings where we have corporate representatives join us and the forum puts that together. business briefings on certain hot topics, advocacy assistance, and our membership is a lot of diverse companies have joined. It's co-chaired by Chobani and Walmart. And we have membership from Best Buy, Driscoll's, just to name a few, Bank of America as well. And all these companies come together on many different initiatives, whether it's sign-on efforts, public comments, really to kind of capitalize and get those voices on these key integration issues.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I sit on several business groups, and I have to say this is the one that I just feel like I get the most out of, but I also feel like I'm really contributing to this group also in terms of like finding, cool ways to put us to work, which is really what businesses want to do when they get involved in organizations and business groups like this. I want to ask you one more thing, and then we're going to get to Jenny and talk about Upwardly Global. And I'll be real transparent about my knowledge of National Immigration Forum before I came to Tyson. As you guys probably know, I'm very involved in adult education and workforce development across the nation, but I had really only knew the name of National Immigration Forum. And as I dug in, as our listeners could hear, this organization really digs in and does all kinds of really unique areas. And one of the ones that I just felt like could not believe I had never really heard about this is the English at Work program that you also facilitate through National Immigration Forum. So this is an online ESL program that, I mean, as soon as I got introduced to it, and like I said, late to the game, I just really felt like, how on earth had I missed this? But tell us a little bit about English at Work, because I think this is a really unique offering that you have from the National Immigration Forum.
Yes, absolutely. So that is one of our integration programs that we offer at the work site. You mentioned the remote model, but we also have in-person options depending really on company needs. And this is a solution for limited English proficient employees really looking to improve their communication skills at work. And then for the companies that are looking to upskill this workforce and really retain and promote that diverse workforce. And the forum through this program really pioneered this specific industry contextualized blended model and curriculum. We partner with accredited community colleges to deliver this curriculum in person or remotely. And every curriculum is original and really contextualized for that industry. Our industries span, anything from retail and grocery to manufacturing. And what's really, really critical with this program is that our team is proactive. And we're really there from the beginning to end as far as implementation support. And there's no added workload to the company in implementing this opportunity. They're just, promoting the program. And then when we have candidates on board, we really deliver everything from beginning to end with a very structured program. And that proactive support that we're providing learners starts at onboarding to even a graduation ceremony. And so when they complete this program, they receive our certificate of completion from an accredited college. And we've really seen through the thousands of workers that have been supported, how they've been able to improve their job performance, really develop that critical confidence they need, and be more satisfied at their jobs. And of course, this has resulted in retention and even promotions for the employees that we partner with. And even we have employees asking when the next class is, and really, really excited. And it's spreading sometimes like wildfire throughout the workforce because they hear from their colleagues about the resource.
Absolutely. Like I said, it was just totally unknown to me, and this, for our adult education audience and our education audience, this is kind of a really robust system that sits aside our federally funded system, and it just shows where community-based and other organizations are getting involved here with colleges integrated, working with businesses to tackle the English as a second language issue in a really exciting, compelling way. So definitely in our show notes, we're going to talk about how you can take a look at the English at Work website as well as National Immigration Forum. But I don't want to move too much further down the line until we hear from Jenny and Upwardly Global. So Jenny, we are so happy to have you on. You're, like I said, it's Old Home Week for you with your National Immigration Forum colleagues, and half the stuff they spoke of, I'm sure you probably had your fingerprints all over or started yourself. So tell us a little bit about Upwardly Global as an organization that's just so active on so many fronts, and what you do there, and a little bit about, and we'll get to more of this later on here, but more about how you're working currently with the Afghan refugees that have come into the United States in the last year.
Yeah, thank you, Anson. Yes, it's so exciting to hear about these incredible opportunities offered by the National Immigration Forum. So I plus one on all that amazing work, and hope folks will dive into this amazing organization and the programs that they offer. Yeah, Upwardly Global is a really unique organization. We really seek to fill a key niche or a chasm, really, between three fields. So there's traditional workforce space, there's a traditional immigration space, and then a traditional refugee resettlement space. And there's a number of folks who do not have interventions specifically tailored to ensure that their barriers are met in those spaces. I come from all of those backgrounds, and so this is not a critique. We all know we have limited resources, and we're all trying really hard to leverage opportunities. So that's not a criticism. It just happened to exist. There's over 2.3 million folks who have advanced education and advanced professional backgrounds and have migrated for different reasons to the U.S. and are unable to find their career pathway opportunities to re-enter a professional career position and be able to use their skills. We all know that we desperately need them to, so that we, as workforce, as communities, and other entities can function at our highest level, right? Right now, in the 4 cities where we have offices, there's a 3 million surplus job gap, right? Where we can't fill key roles. That's just mid to high skill. And that's not even the entire spectrum. And so we know we need these individuals to be able to use all of their skills and to plug in. And so that's why our organization was developed. We've scaled beyond that work, but our direct service work is really tailored at offering job coaching, professional networking, and skilling to come alongside job seekers who may be working already and are looking at how can I now come alongside in parallel and work on my professional development. So that's our direct service program, and happy to drill in more when we get into the Afghan response, because there will be a lot of that work. But we've also now taken the 23 years of experience that we have really tailored to serve this population, and we've now begun to scale those efforts through a platform that we call Jobversity. And we partner with states, municipalities, workforce boards, community colleges, NGOs, and others. And soon, very soon, employers actually with that platform to be able to come alongside and give the resources that we've developed for immigrants and refugees to have what they need to really enter the U.S. job market and to be able to live into their professional development goals and their professional pathways. And so this is everything from, if you're from Ethiopia, you've never negotiated a salary in your life or received a job offering, you graduate college and go straight to the professional setting. So it's everything from the cultural pieces that come with the U.S. Job market, all the way to upskilling and reskilling opportunities, like through partners such as Google and Microsoft that we work with, really giving technical and hard skills to folks so they're ready to enter. So we have all of those services, and then a third bucket that we use, or that we use to reach this community and scale these initiatives, is our employer engagement work. So we have 155 companies sitting on a DEI working group. And what we've really done with this group is to help come alongside a lot of the corporate DEI initiatives and help encourage employers to think about including additional practices for immigrants and refugees who are often people of color and are often left out of those initiatives. So really help to develop best practices and work together to come up with great models that we can use to scale these efforts. So we do that, also hiring and training and a number of other employer engagement initiatives that we can get into down the road. But those are the three main ways that we seek to support immigrants and refugees in this context.
I love it. I love the wide reach you have it upwardly global, and I mean, you mentioned something that I think it will resonate with our employers as well as with our education community. But the cultural kind of competency of finding a job in America is just as difficult as like having the English words to apply and interview for a job. And you guys do that so well that I just think it is such a gap out there in terms of really helping people compete for jobs in the labor market. So thank you very much. I just love everything both these organizations do. And I really want to get into some questions here. And it's funny, you kind of helped tee things off for us, Jenny, because you said DEI and NGO, and I'm like, okay, so we're going to get into some terms here now. DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think a lot of our employer partners will know that. But that's a term that's not widely used in education still. Sometimes, they're still kind of getting into their own spaghetti bowl of terminologies in the education sector. But I wanted to turn over to National Immigration Forum and kind of take us to school for a little bit in terms of talking about some of the terms that our business community and our education community are going to hear when they start thinking about, especially our businesses' employment. I really want to think about like unpacking some of the terminology. I mean, there's a lot of it out there, but I hear things like temporary protective status, special immigrant visas, even the term immigrant versus refugee, humanitarian parole, family petition. Can our friends there at the National Immigration Forum help us out here and tell us a little bit more about some of these key terms that we're going to hear in these conversations and what they mean for our business listeners out there for sure?
Sure. I think it's great to start off with the sort of alphabet soup of immigration, and these terms are in the news very frequently. So I'll go through some of them, and then I'm sure Helena or Jenny can add if needed. But we can start off I hope most employers are familiar with the work permit, which is officially called the Employment Authorization Document, an EAD. So on that is what category an immigrant or refugee is eligible to work under. So there's different categories based on different immigration classifications. Refugee, which is mostly what we're talking about today. There is a legal definition of a refugee, of a person who is no longer in their home country due to persecution because of their race, nationality, religion, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group, and that they cannot go back to that country. So while millions of people throughout the world do meet that definition, not all of them are legally designated as refugees or admitted into the United States as refugees, and which we'll discuss a little bit further with the Afghan situation. There are certain benefits that refugees get that immigrants do not. Special immigrant visa, there are several special immigrant type visas, but the one I think that is most commonly heard now in relation to the refugee situation in Afghanistan is a special immigrant visa for Afghans or Iraqis who helped the U.S. military or the U.S. government during the military efforts in those specific countries. That is a pathway to a green card. It is a multi-year process. Humanitarian parole, very commonly heard during the Afghan evacuation. It's a discretionary form of immigration status for someone for urgent humanitarian reasons or in the public interest of the United States. So A majority of Afghans who were evacuated were admitted or allowed into the United States via humanitarian parole. It does enable someone to obtain a work permit or an EAD, same thing, and it's just not permanent, and it's not a pathway to a green card or lawful permanent residency. A family petition, the U.S. has certain categories of family relationships that they allow people to apply for family members. So children over 21, U.S. citizen children over 21 can apply for their parents. U.S. citizens and green card holders can apply for their spouses and certain children. There gets to be different questions if the child's married or over or under 21, things of that nature. And then siblings of U.S. citizens can all file family petitions. And there's different waiting periods based on the category, in some instances, the country where someone's from. And then another term that's in the news frequently, especially in relation to Ukraine and Afghanistan, is an internally displaced person, abbreviated as an IDP, which is someone who essentially meets the refugee definition but is still within their country of origin. So maybe they lived in the eastern part of the country, now they're in the western part of the country or in some sort of IDP camp. I'm just checking if I've answered I think those were all the terms that we went over.
Yeah.
And
I think that's very useful. I mean, I want to put in our show notes maybe some places where it would be good resources that we could send our employer partners to kind of find these terms on their own. I was taking notes myself during all this, learned a lot there. So we appreciate it. It gives us some good kind of foundation to frame some of our questions about involvement. And so I want to move to a question about I know employers want to be involved in possibly hiring and supporting immigrants and refugees. And I really want to kind of hear from you guys in terms of how businesses can get involved. It's immediately right now, it's a very tight labor market. Businesses are looking for workers and they want to help individuals find their footing in America through employment. And I know for some of these workers that may be downstream in terms of the events that are happening today in Ukraine. But I know it's currently happening, of course, with the Afghan refugees, and there's just kind of this sequence of services and things like that are happening. But having worked in this before, I know sometimes, especially for the individuals themselves, it can be very fast moving. So what are some activities aside? We'll get to employment, but I want to know what are some things you see businesses doing right now related to the Ukrainian population that they're getting involved in creating advocacy and creating awareness. What are some things you see that businesses are doing to kind of jump in now, maybe knowing that these individuals may arrive in the States later and become eligible for employment? But what's happening right now in terms of our Ukrainian refugees and how businesses are involved? And I'll turn this over to the National Immigration Forum first.
Sorry about that. So some of our actually members on our corporate roundtable have been pretty active in some of their involvements to this particular crisis. And the way that companies have responded has been mixed. There's been a lot of financial support where companies have been pledging aid, whether that means, for example, Starbucks donating any of the royalties from their business operations in Russia, or just pledging support to different relief organizations to get basic needs addressed, whether it is water, shelter, food. And then also thinking in terms of long-term support and different resettlement agencies. So there has been a lot of financial support from companies like Bank of America, for example, donating $1 million for Ukrainian relief efforts. Airbnb providing practical support in as far as making available free temporary housing for up to 100,000 refugees from Ukraine. And then some of our some of these companies really using their particular expertise. Google, making sure to supply more UN resources related to being a refugee, or Microsoft, for example, really ramping their efforts up as far as detecting and advising the Ukrainian government on cyber attacks. Meta, formerly Facebook, really zeroing in on fact checking and stepping up on privacy and security. And then you look at some company like Uber. I just read today they are offering unlimited rides from the border to different cities in Poland. So there's a lot of different ways that companies have been getting involved, also through their foundations. Chobani has an tent organization, I think that Jenny will touch on later. But just the way that they are able to use their expertise and then their connections to other organizations to really respond to this crisis, and to also make sure that if they are directing funding, they're doing so to vetted organizations that really specialize in this work. It's one thing to just donate online to a cause that is very important in the news, but companies really zeroing in on, Red Cross, UNICEF, some of these really big international organizations that can make a difference and that know these populations.
I love that. It warms my heart to hear these stories. I love the angle too of sharing their expertise, because that's something, of course, businesses can do very well, and finding ways to contribute that way. I recently read the article in the Business Chief about how businesses were kind of stepping up to the plate. Your CEO, Ali Noorani, had a great article in the Bulwark this week, I think, about how communities were mobilizing during the crisis. So I just really love to hear this early on, and knowing that down the line there could be the employment piece that we're going to be looking at. As an opportunity to give more. So Jenny, I want to move over to you and talk a little bit more about Upwardly Global and what they're doing in the areas of refugee inclusion. I know you have been just really spectacularly busy across the nation with a specific focus on our prior and ongoing focus with the Afghan refugees. So please talk to us a little bit about how business and educators are contributing to these efforts. What are you doing? You were involved very early on, I know, and it's just got to be somewhat almost an overwhelming effort sometimes with the urgency we had facing us there, and how quickly things moved. I was just so impressed. But tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Anson. And Helena, I think you had that great list. So it's really wonderful to hear, some of the ways that companies are using their resources. And I hope we are all together learning how to be ready to your point, Anson, for the hiring side when this hits. There is a movement right now, though, that is available. I want to make sure we don't skip over this. We do have, on our own job seeker list, we do have Ukrainians that have already migrated. Some of them began to feel the tensions and migrated over the course of the last year or so. And everyone knows tensions have been rising since Maidan in 2014. So there are Ukrainians who are work authorized, who are looking to be employed now. And so I want to make sure we don't skip over that. There's a great population. And the TPS, the temporary protective status folks. Thank you for reminding me to get out of the alphabet soup. But those group of folks that were here as of March 1st, we estimate there's over 75,000 of them. Those folks will be almost pretty immediately eligible for work permit once the Federal Register gives us the date and the process for them to do their applications, right? So that's coming down the pike very soon, and we'll have a large group of folks. So employers can begin to learn from our Afghan response moment and start to align now. The Afghan response, we're We are just winding down on the evacuation. So we're in the last 3,000 folks. Upwardly Global, UpGlow, if you want to shorten it as a friend, you can say that. We have been on all the safe havens. So all of the military bases throughout the country since the first week of evacuation, processing job seekers and putting together a national workforce development plan. And I really urge employers, if you're not yet plugged into the welcome.us movement, definitely get into that coalition. It's super important. And I have a feeling that this is the roadmap for anything that we do. You didn't hear it here. I have nothing official to say, but it could be a roadmap for what's going to happen as we begin to assist our Ukrainian neighbors. And as we have a designation of number of folks that will be resettling. So it's a great coalition to go ahead and plug into now. You can join the Afghan movement now, but what we've done is we've begun to process those folks and work with partners. The refugee resettlement orgs and ourselves sat together and put a group of services together to be able to say we can help job seekers from the person who's never worked before and doesn't speak English yet, all the way to the MD who speaks 5 languages and is looking to continue their career pathway, because we need everyone in that spectrum. And so we're working collaboratively together. Some quick stats that might be interesting to employers is that of the working population we met, so just a reminder, of the 95,000, there's about 40,000 that are children. So of the working population, 20 to 30% of those folks are English proficient, have professional backgrounds and advanced educational degrees. Another 40% are English proficient and align more, had backgrounds aligning more to the trades. So together, this is an incredible group of folks that employers can and should be tapping into, right? That's an over 60 to 75% English proficient working population. And the English at Work program is an incredible thing you can be doing. You can partner with UpGlow. We have trained all the recruiters at Walmart. We've trained a number of hiring managers and recruiters, Deloitte and others, to really be ready to know how to interview these job seekers and understand how they then enter the job market and how to be ready to integrate them. So we've put that whole plan together and we've been working collaboratively. So employers can hire Afghans still now. In fact, this is a perfect moment to be plugging into that, because folks have pretty much resettled, and some of them have chosen a secondary resettlement site, which means they're probably going to settle there long term. And so we're really starting to see Texas, California, Washington State, the DMV region, and the New York and the New York City region really beef up with a ton of Afghan newcomers. So employers can and should start to hire and look for programs to help them. You can also really lean in with other types of integration opportunities and blended workforce opportunities. We've seen some incredible returnship models and paid internship models to really help this population plug in. Returnship is just a fancy term that means someone who's left the work site for any reason. Women who left during COVID because of caretaking situations, and migrants who have moved to our country and naturally have a period that's dropped off their resume. So it's a way of saying that we won't hold these gaps in employment against you, but we will look to you as a key segment of our working population. So there's a lot of ways that we can learn from this Afghan moment, and employers can plug into some of those opportunities.
Wow.
So, Anson, I got to jump in because I've been sitting back listening, and so I'm in awe of all the expertise that's on tonight. And it's the workforce, I think, that most intrigues me when it comes to immigration. And Jenny, you touched on a few things about, reintegration and getting people back to work. And it's really the simple things, that I think we often overlook, like getting a bank account for direct deposit and having the proper identification, right? And, all those little things that that really get people back and successful and reintegrated. Peer mentorship. just mentoring other people in the workforce and those kinds of things. And I'm glad to hear that there are companies like yours that are out there that are really guiding that and guiding employers, because I really think oftentimes employers just don't know where to go. They have someone that comes to them that has some talent, and they definitely have skill set. Matter of fact, they may have been ultra licensed in their home country, but when they come here, they they go to apply for that job, and then they want to get them in, but they don't have that license yet, hasn't been transferred, and they haven't got to work through that part and really getting them into the workforce. And I'm curious from all of you, like that integration piece, the programs that you have, are how can employers really access those tools and really find out how to do a service for the talent that's out there?
Yeah, I could jump in, and then I would love for the forum to add. They have incredible integration pieces. So, employers can reach out. I think either of us would be really, really happy to help navigate. This is a small world, and we're all working in the same direction. Upglow comes alongside businesses that are hiring in the mid to high skill range, but also businesses who are looking to promote internally and continue to move their own talent along through their career pathway and really look at that retention effort. So, integration's huge. Inclusion is huge for all of those reasons. And so folks can reach out. There's to ourselves. There's also an organization called Tent, which Helena called out, which Hamdi, who's the CEO of Chobani, set aside and created as an organization to help navigate traffic. If you reach out to Tent, you'll get to us or one of our partners, but you definitely can reach out directly. And we have technical assistance providers who will work with your company to say, what are your goals? What are you trying to get at? What are the resources you have available? And if we are not the right program, we certainly know the couple of folks out there who might have a perfect fit. And that's all we're working to do together is just to integrate newcomers. So it's a great question, Jeff. I mean, folks can reach out. It's not such an enigma, right? It sounds like a lot to say, what can I do to support these folks? But really, it's just as simple as having a focus on your own pain points in hiring, in retention, all of that, and then just coming to say, this is what I'm looking to achieve. I really want to support my folks. How can I be doing this in the best way possible to walk with immigrants and refugees through this journey? So certainly, I don't want to speak for the forum, but I know you can reach out to us, and they might have more things to add.
I got one more follow-up, and I'll be quiet. Is English as a second language is, I'm secretary on the board of COAID, the Coalition on Adult Education, and we look at English as a second language, and it's just so underfunded in our country. And I'm just wondering, in your work and the work that you all do, how important is that language education, and what efforts do your organizations make to try and make that language connection back here in the United States to English?
Helena, did you want to
jump in on? Yeah, sorry about that. Yes, so it is critical. And, when a new American, a new immigrant has that grasp and understanding of English, it opens doors, that confidence. So really partnering with companies, partnering with foundations to offer our services potentially at reduced costs until the companies are ready to invest in the program after they have piloted it. We've really seen the tremendous impact of the growth of the employees. And, the first person that many times the company really decides to partner with us on some of these programs is because they hear about the experience from their own employee. They see that growth where they maybe worked on in the back end of the store, and now they have that confidence to approach customers and work in front because of that promotion, because of being upskilled through a program like English at Work. So it really, we're looking at all different ways to continue that the program and different funding and support that is out there, and that will hopefully arise in the future.
Awesome. Anson, I know we got to take a break for a minute. And I also just want to give a shout out to Jenny. I know she's got another commitment. She's going to be jumping off in a second, but I did want to thank her and for your expertise and your passion and the work that you guys are doing is so invaluable. And it's going to be so needed over the next few months to years here in the country. So you're listening to Behind Every Employer, and we're going to be right back in a minute. You've been listening to the Behind Every Employer podcast with Anson Green and Jeffrey Abramowitz. This podcast is sponsored by the Coalition on Adult Basic Education. Check us out on coaid.org, on the COAID YouTube channel, on Spotify, Facebook, or Instagram. We are back -1. We are back. And a big shout out to Jenny for taking some time out this night. Her expertise and her passion for our company is amazing. We're going to definitely put all the information on our website about where you can find her and how you can connect with her.
Yeah, I wanted to chime in. This has gotten to be way more dynamic and awesome than I was anticipating in terms of what I'm learning. So it's just been fantastic from all of our speakers. One thing Jenny said that I definitely want to underscore when she was talking about the refugees from Afghanistan was the kind of the skilled breakout, the high skilled, internationally trained professional percentages she gave us, those that were English proficient but had background in the trades. And so for our business partners, I know they're thinking, wow, this is like a great workforce that we can tap into and we should be tapping into. And so that's a big lesson learned is organizations like this are helping kind of do that vetting and help identify like the skills of these individuals as they come into the U.S. And then, thinking to our adult education listeners, our ESL teachers out there that are listening, when I was in a classroom and had refugees and immigrants, I always felt like I was the only one kind of working on an island. And so it's so nice to know that there are these other organizations providing these supports, and it's about weaving these services together to really help because it definitely takes a community to help individuals new to America to kind of find their footing. So it's just been really kind of encouraging and empowering to hear these things in action that are happening. And then as we think, forward, and I want us to kind of think about our next question here real quick from the National Immigration Forum team related to looking into a crystal ball with the Ukrainians and what might we see in the future here? May it be the same? May it be different from what Jenny is experiencing and you guys experienced with those individuals from Afghanistan as a way of kind of prepping, although we're still kind of, heavily in the weeds when it comes to the refugees from Afghanistan. This is kind of the next wave and it's on TV and we're thinking about it. But can we look into a crystal ball with any certainty that there would be some differences in either how they may be treated, in terms of like the policies they fall under, or do we just know maybe by trends that maybe not that many would come to the U.S. As we saw with the Afghan refugees? Do we know anything like that, or is it just pure guesswork right now?
That's a great question. I can give some of the framework for statistics and the immigration side of it. But just for context, which I think is really helpful, this is one of, if not the fastest moving refugee crisis. There, as of yesterday, I was on a call with UNHCR and IOM, that there's 3 million Ukrainian refugees, so meaning outside of the country, within 21 days. And there are about 2 million IDPs within Ukraine. So that is an incredible number, of course. And this particular refugee flow has really unique and acute vulnerabilities. The majority are women and children, and either single women or women with multiple children or unaccompanied children themselves, because men ages 18 to 60 are generally not allowed to leave Ukraine because of fighting reasons or need for fighters, except for certain exceptions. So just that's like sort of the scope of where we're at. And of course, there are questions as to where do Ukrainians want to go? Are there family ties to other countries in surrounding countries or throughout Europe? Is there interest in going to another country such as the United States in terms of resettlement? The refugee resettlement system is a slow-moving system, and it. You mentioned the article that the Forum CEO wrote, where it really does discuss that the U.S. refugee resettlement system had been pretty much dismantled under the prior administration, and the Forum has advocated, as well as many other organizations, to revamp it even before this crisis. I think it's really important to note when we make comparisons to Afghanistan that Afghanistan was somewhat different in that it was a evacuation timed with the U.S.'s own evacuation, and none of these Afghan evacuees were admitted as refugees. So they did not go through the traditional refugee resettlement process. It took, an act of Congress to allow them to access refugee benefits. Normally, if you enter with parole, you're not entitled to those benefits, such as cash assistance, matching grant for employment. Some of your employers might be familiar with that program. Of course, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't anticipate that there's going to be a similar mass movement of, I think there's about 70,000 Afghans that were admitted into the United States in this evacuation program. I don't think we anticipate that. It might look more like traditional refugee resettlement, perhaps expedited if that is something we've heard the administration is considering.
Well, the changes, and you know what, we're not ready in our country. Just think about it. The repercussions of what's happened in Ukraine are so different because oftentimes the dad or the male in the family is not going to be with them, and it's often been the breadwinner. And now daycare becomes a huge obstacle.
Yeah, right.
Providing that daycare for the children that are the parents that need to go to work and earn a living. So I think the challenges are going to be really kind of different as this unfolds and as some of the Ukrainian refugees find their way to the United States.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, that was super enlightening just then. I had a sense there was going to be some differences. This is way more dramatically different. And Jeff, I definitely would underscore that gender mix is going to be so much different that really pulls on different sectors of our public systems in terms of subsidized childcare and things like that, as you mentioned. And having worked in those systems before, I don't think they're following stuff like this, doing the capacity building. These are public welfare systems and things that take years to kind of ramp up for things. Sometimes we're talking about things that are happening in days and weeks and months. And this one has really been accelerated. I want to end before we get to our lightning round with one more question, because I don't want to talk as if there weren't refugees from Ukraine in America now. And I hear there's maybe up to 70,000 or so. And I heard somewhere on the news, a lot of them clustered in, I believe, in Ohio and some other places. Tell us kind of right now, National Immigration Forum colleagues, what can you tell us about that population in terms of their work status and things like that?
Sure. So the American Immigration Council and when advocacy organizations such as the Forum were calling for Ukraine to be designated for temporary protected status, did put out some information about statistics, and they estimated about 70 to 75,000 Ukrainians in the United States could be eligible for temporary protected status. And that there was a mix. Some Ukrainians within that estimation were on non-immigrant or temporary visas, such as a work visa or a student visa, something of that nature, where they might already have work authorization or not. About 5,000 were estimated to have DACA, which is the Dream Deferred Action for Early Childhood Arrivals, where they generally have a work permit, and about 34,000 didn't have an identifiable form of status. So that doesn't mean they don't have status. It just means that they couldn't determine it. So maybe they were on a tourist visa or their status had lapsed, something like that. And of course, as we mentioned earlier, TPS would enable a work permit if someone is approved for TPS. And I don't know if Helena wants to add some of their the demographics in terms of education and former employment.
Yeah. I know Jenny earlier mentioned how we saw in the case of Afghan refugees, some might be professionals with higher education or very strong English skills, and then others may need that upskilling and that ESL to really be able to find and retain employment. So it's really, really important that we're cataloging their needs, their skill set, and then ready to really mobilize quickly. But from that same American Immigration Council batch of statistics, what we've seen so far from the 75,000 that are currently in the country, and of course it remains to be seen and when all the data is crunched and as new people actually come to the U.S., but what we know from the people that are currently here is that around 44% have high school or college level degrees. And 21% have advanced degrees, and 28% have bachelor's degrees. So a very small percentage, around 6%, has less than high school. So that kind of gives you an idea of their experience. And then as far as industries, it's really a mix of health and social assistance at around 13%, construction also around 10%, administrative support 11%, and then tourism, hospitality 11%. And then there's a 41% of other. So it really remains to be seen where those people fall. And then, of course, any new refugees that come into the country. So we're all kind of, looking into that crystal ball, trying to figure out what's going on. But that's what we've been able to determine from previous statistical analysis.
Wow, this is amazing. I can't wait to listen to this podcast again because I can't take notes fast enough for some of the statistics and data. It's just fantastic. You guys have been such great guests. I know we're going to move to a quick break here, and then we're going to get to our lightning round. So hold on tight, and we're going to come back and charge our two guests here with them charging us with some things that we could be thinking about and our listeners could be doing to kind of prepare for the current situations now with our refugee communities and think about the future with potential individuals coming from Ukraine. So Jeff, take us to a break.
We'll be right back. You're back. Our lightning round.
I love the lightning round. Absolutely. So I want to, Samantha and Helena, this is our lightning round. We want you to charge our listeners really with things that we could start thinking about in terms of getting prepared in the months and perhaps a year from now, but really maybe even immediately for those employers out there that are looking to hire refugees in their communities. We just heard these great statistics about the current Ukrainians and Afghan refugees that are in the States now, and of course other groups that have been here. But charge our listeners with what can we do now to kind of look at, think about, plan for, talk to, what would be some really tangible next steps for our listeners to take?
Mm-hmm. I think really this podcast has really shown that importance of language access for the refugees that are going to be coming in and that are already here, the immigrants and refugees from other countries. It's also not a one-size-fits-all approach. We can analyze the Afghan crisis, we can analyze this Ukraine crisis, but at the end of the day, we need to talk to those people that are impacted and the organizations that really excel and specialize in this work and also in those unique populations. There are some things that I think kind of go across the board for incoming immigrants or refugees, and that is connecting them to their local community, whether that is through churches or just some way to help them integrate until they get that job, whether it is a nonprofit organization or just someone who can get them started. I know before we had talked about opening a bank account, really simple things like that, so that they can get acclimated, because the people that are fleeing and looking for new homes are going to have experienced various levels of trauma. And that transition period is really, really important for the employer to understand, and for that community that's going to be welcoming them in. So if there's anything, that people can take away after this, is really that one size fits all approach is not the way to go with immigrant communities, but there are certain things that if you're just being a human, that you want to offer and welcome to new people in your community.
Absolutely. I love that. I think sometimes these just real practical things, the bank account, for the work we do over at Tyson Foods, and I'm thinking about the future here in the summer, but getting kids enrolled in school and, figuring out all those kind of things, which sometimes you and I can't figure out, there are these systems that we just have to navigate ourselves. For those new Americans coming in, it can be quite an additional challenge. Jeff, for you, do you have a charge for the listeners out there?
I have a charge. So my charge is this. Every one of us has these old set of dishes down in our basement. We have our children's old clothing that's up in our attics. We have all these things that are sitting around. And those are the things that can make transition so much easier when people come over to our country. Yeah. So go into your attics, go into your basement, start stockpiling, put a note on, make sure it finds its way to a refugee family that's coming over. So that's my charge.
Oh, man, I love it. I love it. Well, this has been a great episode. Samantha, Helena, and Jenny, who was on previously. It's just been a joy to hear your insights. And I want to ask you, how can our listeners connect with you and your organizations?
Yes, so our contact information and a lot of really great fact sheets from Sam's policy team are available on our nationalimmigration.forum.org, as well as additional information for employers interested in our English at Work program or the citizenship program that I work on, and then employers that are interested in joining our corporate roundtable. So we can definitely share that in the notes.
Absolutely.
Afterwards.
Fantastic. Well, Jeff, thanks again for another great episode. Why don't you take us out?
You got it. Take care, everybody, and thank you.
You've been listening to the Behind Every Employer podcast with Anson Green and Jeffrey Abramowitz. This podcast is sponsored by the Coalition on Adult Basic Education. Check us out on coaid.org, on the COAID YouTube channel, on Spotify, Facebook, or Instagram.
Right. Fantastic.